read something that made me pause. Scientists found that the brain goes through 5 distinct eras across a lifetime: childhood, adolescence, adulthood, early aging, and late aging, with the transition from adolescence to adulthood as the biggest turning point, which doesn't really happen until your early 30s. That's when the brain shows the most change, the largest shift, and then finally, it stabilizes. One of the researchers said, "Looking back, many of us feel our lives have been characterized by different phases. It turns out that brains also go through these eras." I turned 32 last 2025, and looking back at this year, I think I felt that shift happening. I finally stepped out of limbo as a Filipino immigrant living in Australia. 2025 was the year life changed the most. I started the year in Brisbane in my parents' living room. They had gone to bed early and I was watching Sydney's fireworks on the TV. Sydney, a place I've been living in since 2019. A place I wasn't quite ready to go back to just yet. Where returning meant going back to the same job that sponsored my temporary resident visa and brought me to Australia. Back to the same apartment, to the same routines and the same waiting. Waiting for my Australian citizenship ceremony that had been pending for months. Still no date, no clarity, just me refreshing my inbox 17 times a day, hoping for something to change, and getting defeated when there was none. I was 6 years in as a Filipino immigrant in Australia. 6 years of temporary visas, sponsorship dependencies, of building a life in a place that hadn't fully accepted me yet. I was restless, impatient, and frustrated. Suspended somewhere between who I was and who I was becoming. Not quite belonging, but also not quite leaving. I wanted stability. The kind that doesn't disappear with a visa expiry date. The kind where you can make plans without asterisks, where you no longer get slightly anxious every time you went through immigration. Where you stop feeling like a visitor in the country you'd been living in for nearly a decade. For Sydney to feel less temporary and more like home. And like popcorn in a pot, for a long time, nothing happened. Everything was just there, waiting for heat to build up. And then finally, one kernel popped. My citizenship ceremony finally came. 6 years after restarting my life from just 2 suitcases. I sat in a room full of strangers from everywhere, all of us about to become Australian. I cried more than I expected. For the version of me who didn't know if she'd make it here, my immigration chapter was finally coming to a close. In March, I applied for my Australian passport. $412 was a lot, but I was happy for it to be the last immigration fee I'd ever pay. No more visa renewals, no more sponsorship forms, no more counting days outside the country that could affect my residency requirements. In April, my passport came, and a TikTok I made of it went viral. Strangers celebrating my citizenship with me. I didn't know what to do with that, honestly. People I'd never met, happy that I finally and officially belonged. May, I resigned from the company that brought me to Australia, one that sponsored my visa, the one I thought I owed my loyalty to forever. Leaving felt like betrayal, like ingratitude. But staying had started to feel like shrinking. And for the first time, I had no visa tying me down. I could leave with no consequences. And I'm happy that I did. And then came the biggest surprise this year. He proposed. I said yes before he even finished asking. I got engaged to the love of my life. And that sentence still makes my chest tight in the best way possible. In June, I started a new job, fully remote. No office, no commute, just me figuring out how to work without anyone watching. Majority of the days felt like freedom, but others, too much silence. In July, we sacrificed our Saturdays for open homes. walking through houses and imagining hours in them. In August was my first international trip as an Australian citizen. I spent 4 weeks in Poland, second time in his childhood home. I was welcomed so warmly that this place so foreign was strangely starting to feel familiar to me. September and October were dedicated to my favorite people's birthday celebrations that I was able to join in person. Something I found impossibly hard when you're living abroad. In November, 3 weeks of it was spent in the Philippines. Him meeting my extended family for the first time. Watching him eat with his hands the Filipino way. Watching my Lola teach him words like pispis and mumo. My two worlds overlapping at one dinner table. Who would have thought a Filipino girl would leave and come back with an Australian passport and a Polish fiancé? Life is strange. This latter half of the year I lived out of suitcases again. But for different reasons this time. Not chasing visas, just living. And just when I thought the year was ending quietly, I was offered a promotion in December. The title I'd been chasing for months. I thought I was ready. I'd been asking for it, pushing for it even. But when it actually happened, I was scared. Looking back now, 2025 felt most hectic. My bowl was finally full of popcorn. 7 years ago, I arrived in Australia as a Filipino immigrant with a temporary visa and no certainty about what came next. Now I'm a citizen, engaged, building a career, planning a home. Maybe that's what this year was meant to be. The transition the scientists talked about. My brain crossing into adulthood. My life rearranging itself into something steadier. I am genuinely tired, underslept, and somewhat overwhelmed how fast life moves once things fall into place. But I'm also grateful. Grateful for a year that gave me more than I knew to hold. Scientists say that after this transition, 30 plus years of steadiness ahead. I feel majorly unprepared, but I think I'm ready for that steadier era now, ready to just be in the life I built, in the country I chose, with the people I love. Ready for the stars that are finding their way to align once again, and for the dreams that are making their way into becoming my reality.